They had stolen their identity, but then they were getting the job and they were getting all the money for the job, but they weren't paying the taxes. And then the real person got pinged saying they owed all this money to the IRS. And they said, "What are you talking about? I've never worked at that company." And that's how they figured out that the person was stealing their identity, was because they had used their social to rack up all this stuff, for this other job. And that's a real
Wow.
problem.
That is crazy. I mean, how do you even detect that or protect yourself from that, just as a end user, right? Because you can lock your credit, but if someone bought your social security number on a database and now they're using it to apply in your name and they're interviewing, like there isn't even a good way to like protect yourself against that. Not that I know of.
There isn't. I mean, look, I think that we provide some tools. We have a new dossier that we can offer for individuals where it kind of figures out everything that's out there about you, figures out how you might be able to get some of that stuff removed. There's a ton of public accounts. There's a ton of OSINT we don't realize that's out there, like every review you've left, all the comments on websites, all this stuff that when kind of thrown into an LM, the LM does have that magic where it can take in all these different data points. And then it's like, yo, based on all this, how would Joe handle X? And it's like, pretty good response, right? So that I think is an element that people really need to do some cleanup on, is all the crap that we all have out there from, the MySpace account. Well, maybe I'm dating myself, but whatever account you made years ago, and need to get that off there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So is that kind of like how you guys are operating it on the back end, right? You have like this LLM that you've trained on a whole lot of data from maybe, other deep fakes. Maybe you've even done, your own deep fakes and you trained it on that and whatnot, and then you're building this solution based off of all of that information and providing it.
Yeah. So what we do is we'll pull a ton of OSINT on an individual and an organization, and from that, you can see risks like the ability to get your voicemail from your phone, which is all I need to make a deep fake your voice. You're a public person, so we can make lots of deep fakes of you, but the average person is not going to have that, right? And we can pair that with just your LinkedIn picture. You get your picture on LinkedIn, boom. You can have an interactive video chat with that person now, which is unfortunate, and it's very easy, and then you can pair that with all sorts of other data points to see where the biggest risks lie.
Yeah, I mean, like you make it sound pretty easy, right? But I feel like it's not that easy. What do you think, like where do you think the next evolution of this is going, right? We kind of talked about it a little bit before, with the hiring, right? Hiring being heavily impacted even more than it already is. But what would be the next evolution of like the fake itself, right? So you're doing a deep fake of someone's voice and their likeness and whatnot. Add in the OSINT perspective of it. Maybe they're falling just a little bit behind on that category potentially. But where do you think that next curveball is coming from?
Man, I mean, I think that
Is it really hard to predict? Even probably.
the curveball that I'm afraid of is, a lot of this technology, I think, was the domain of state actors a few years ago. And now it's kind of shifted over to professional but funded actors that are organized. And at the end of the day, they just want to make money, that are mostly overseas, right? But they're businesses. I think the thing I'm scared about is it migrating from the business era to the sort of anarchy slash, as I like to say, like, a 13-year-old killing ants era, where it's like someone who doesn't have a clear financial goal, but instead may just enjoy causing havoc. And that's to me some of the scariest, because, this sort of immature 13, 14-year old who's going to do some crazy stuff and whatever is in a lot of ways scarier to me than, some international mafia that wants to make $10 million. Like, they want to make money, take it home to their families and whatever it is, right? Like, and they're going to do that, and it's against the law, and it's bad, and it's morally wrong. But that's different than someone who's like, hey, let's just see if I could turn off the electric grid, right? That I think is to me is the scarier thing, is kind of that terrorist side of things, that this sort of lack of clear morality outcomes. That I think also, the second thing kind of related to that is, like, they might just start throwing these AI agents off into the world, and then they lose power over them. It's the classic Terminator Skynet, angle. But maybe we're beginning to see that, right? Where maybe we're beginning to see these agents that you throw them out into the world, and they're self perpetuating. And we talk about how great they could do all these things, and it is great, right? It's going to I think, lift up productivity and create a post scarcity society. But on the other hand, I think can also cause some real havoc.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the part that it just doesn't sit well with me. Is like
It would
it's
be
like
worrying if it did sit well with you, Joe. So
yeah,
it's good that it doesn't.
I have some people on and they're very nonchalant about it. They're very much, oh, that's not going to happen. There's guardrails in place and whatnot. It's like, I spend all day looking at customers' environments that tell me that they are secure, right? Like from the very first phone call, they tell me we're secure, we're good. There's nothing to worry about in this environment. There's nothing to worry about with the code base. And I look and it's okay, you're using Python from like 10 years ago. Great job. Like that's a huge concern right there. Or oh, this RDS snapshot is publicly available and unencrypted. You're supposed to be secure, right? So it's all those sorts of things that like worry me about it. But then the other side of it is, oh well, we could just turn off the computer or whatever it is, and then you see a report of OpenAI, putting their ChatGPT into a hostile environment, and then from there, it tries to replicate itself because it fears that, you know, they're going to delete the code and whatnot, right? Like that's a little worrisome in my opinion, and we're putting this insane technology in the hands of everyone that has a debit card with like $10 on it. I mean, like how easy is it for a 10-year-old to go get $10, $20, from their parent, right? I mean, like that's not hard at all to do. But now we're giving everyone the power to do this.
Yeah, I know. And look, I'm not on the side of restricting it because I think that will just lead to, the good guys not getting tools and the bad guys are going to find their ways around it and the US falling behind. So there's not like an easy answer there to restricting it, but we should just be eyes wide open that it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah, is there anything out there that's really preparing people, like beyond the enterprise? Because I immediately think of like the vulnerable populations, either really young kids, still in grade school or high school even, and then, the elderly population, right? Because like I could imagine if, someone deep faked me and then called one of my parents, like my parent wouldn't know any different. There'd be no telltale sign of it. Is there any training around it or any sort of technology coming out that'll detect it?
I mean, look, I think that there's obviously some smart detection technologies today for things like deepfakes and whatnot, but different sign-in protocols that are deterministic for some, others that are probabilistic and don't have the sign-in function. But obviously, some stuff's going to get past the filter, and there's going to be an arms race in the models for the probabilistic guys against the models, and how you're going to get it through. There's always going to someone says, "Oh, I found something, and this is amazing," and then some model tackles a way around it. So yeah, I think it's going to be an important filtering mechanism for sure. But I don't think you're going to have a broadly available deterministic solution with 100% efficacy.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it would be difficult because we're kind of in an arms race right now, so to speak, right? I mean, like the adversaries are evolving as quickly, if not quicker, than the defenses, right? Like, deep fakes have been around for a while, but there's been a lot of different, gaps and loopholes and ways around any sort of protection that was made available until, a platform like yours came along and it's actually able to detect when a deep fake is going on.